those first few days, there's going to be a lot of motivation and what you want to do is clear, but it's what you do on the days where you don't want to show up. Everyone is faced with this resistance, and you have to have the discipline to be able to push through those moments. And the best way to do that is not to focus on yourself, is to focus on that purpose, that mission, that long-term view. I can relate to starting with a goal, with an intention, taking massive action in the moment, feeling extremely motivated, and then 4 or 5 days down the track, back into those old patterns, that unmotivated, unresourceful state, and not following through anymore. And I was having an amazing conversation with one of our clients, Gav, who's working with us at Content Only, and he's launched this incredible podcast called Breaking the Silence. And he got to episode 4, which is a milestone into the top 10% of podcast episode producers, showing how many people start and quit, and said, starting to feel that resistance and hitting up against the wall with where to go. And I get it. I have that same feeling sometimes, many years in, with podcasting, with content, with just about any area of my life. And the reality is you're always going to come up against that at times. I've coined the phrase what I call New Year syndrome. When the new year ticks over, most people have these big intentions, these big goals. They want to lose weight, they want to quit smoking or alcohol, build a business. January 1, they're doing all the activity, they throw all the junk food out of the house, they go for this big walk, run, lift weights, work out, eat clean. But then when the motivation dissipates, and they are 4 or 5 days later down the track, those old habits kick in and they stop doing it. And the best example I can give you is go to the gym on the 1st of January. This is a fun exercise, and look around how many people are there. Go the same time the next week, and then see how many people are still there the following week. It paints this picture perfectly. The only way I've worked out to overcome this New Year syndrome is to build habits. And that's where you do something consistently for a roughly 2-month period that it starts to become an automatic behavior. The first proper taste I had of this in my personal world was with running. And in 2019, I committed to running 5 or 6 times a week and started doing it. Once I got to month 3, it was just a behavior that I did, and I haven't stopped since. So for 4 years, I've ran multiple times every single week. I don't feel motivated to do it. I don't feel unmotivated to do it. It's just an automatic thing that happens. I put my shoes on, I stretch, and off I go. And that's where you want to get to with the important and key areas of the personal brand building journey. Last year, in June or July, when I started to show up as Aaron Whitnish again and posting the content, I knew I had to use the same method, which was build a habit. So I started posting at a high frequency every single week, creating the reels. A bit later on, I started podcasting. And I knew if I could show up and do those activities for that first 2 months, they'd become automatic moving forward beyond that point. And that's proven to be true. It's 15, 16 months since I started. I've posted multiple bits of content as Aaron Whitnish every single week. Since I started the podcast, just about every single week, I might have missed 1 or 2, and automatic behaviors. So my invitation when you're building your personal brand is understand that you're going to hit resistance often, especially if you're starting out. And I get that those first few days, there's going to be a lot of motivation. You got this goal and the impact and what you want to do is clear, but it's what you do on the days where you don't want to show up. And it does feel tough. Everyone is faced with this resistance, and you have to have the discipline to be able to push through those moments. And the best way to do that is not to focus on yourself, is to focus on that purpose, that mission, that long-term view. Because let's face it, when you start any endeavor, the instant results aren't normally significant. So it can be a little bit disheartening. But if we push out that timeline to 5, 10, 20 years and look at the compounding nature of working out every day, posting content every day, doing the right activity in your business every day, being present in your relationship for 30 minutes a day, we can see where that's going to lead over that longer horizon. If we're looking at it in just today's terms, it's not going to look so great or attractive. So you've got to be able to push out the timelines to understand why you need to do the activity or behaviors today. And it's okay to mess up. As I said in a recent episode, if you miss a day, miss a moment, that doesn't matter. Don't beat yourself up over it. It's about doing the right thing 80 to 90% of the time, and you'll win in the long run. So like with Gav, in his story, I just said, let's take all the constraints and things that are making it harder to move forward out the way. And what had happened was Gav was seeding what he was going to talk about in his next episode. And that was putting a container around his creative freedom freedom. So I said, Gav, the best thing to do with the podcast is to have complete autonomy and not, unless you've got a guest or someone that's scheduled to come on, let yourself talk about current events, things that are happening in your life, whatever you feel compelled to share, rather than putting it into a container, which I did on my other podcast, the Content Marketing Podcast, and it got really hard because I'd squeezed myself into this narrow lane. I didn't have a lot of inspiration and ideas coming through, and it was a real effort to show up and do the show. And I could see that was something that might have been happening with Gav. And as soon as we took those constraints off and gave that permission to do whatever you want as your personal brand and show up powerfully and utilize anything that's happening, all of a sudden all these moving parts that are almost choking the process gets removed. So the question I have for you is, where in your life are you putting too many constraints or moving paths that are creating resistance for you to follow through with the activity or the behavior? I had David message me on social media and he asked me the question I posted about my physical transformation over the last 4 years, and he goes, what would you suggest to someone starting out? And it's the same that I've pushed in this episode today. It's start with a sustainable habit and just build one habit. Don't try, and if you want to get in shape, don't try and do the nutrition, the workouts, everything at once, because there's too much to manage. Dial in one habit. That could just be starting with a 15-minute walk around the block each day. And as your fitness improves, you can push out the 15 minutes to 20 minutes or 30 minutes. You might ramp up the intensity of that activity. And then once you form that consistent exercise habit, then you might start layering in a nutrition habit. So rather than trying to do everything at once and make it unsustainable and going to the extremes, do the baby steps, one thing at a time, something that you know there's no excuses for not executing on. A 15-minute walk around the block each day. There's no excuses in 99% of cases to not be able to achieve that. And if you can't get out, you could just do it around the house and get that 15 minutes in, and then allow that to expand as you develop in that area. The same with content. If you're showing up as a personal brand, don't make it impossible for yourself and go, I'm going to post all these times a day or during the week. Start with, hey, I'm going to post these very achievable and attainable and accountable amount of times a week, and stick to that so you build those muscles and progress and add as you grow and as your resources grow. So the takeaway or the action item, as there always is on these podcast episodes, so you can grow your personal brand with me, is where are you putting the constraints on the handbrake in the progress that you want to make as your personal brand? What can you eliminate so you don't keep running into this New Year's Day syndrome where you get started in bursts of motivation and then fall back into old patterns, where you know that you can start building these habits that are required for sustainable long-term success, and then maybe create that compelling vision for the future. What will it look like in 10, 20 years time if you do these daily consistent activities, whether that's with your content, with your health, with your working out, in your business, wherever is required. So if this has been a helpful episode and you're not following the show, make sure you subscribe on the platform that you're listening on. And if you can leave a 5-star review, it'll help more people discover the show and it'd be greatly appreciated.